Before we jump into this project, I just want to take a minute to talk about something. It may not be easy to hear, and it definitely isn't easy to say, but it could literally save someone's life. Suicide rates among veterans has skyrocketed. It's estimated that 22 a day will take their own lives. These are our friends, family, co-workers, and neighbors. I know it might not seem like you can help, but something as simple as reaching out to someone could make a huge difference. Some people just need to know that they're not alone. I'll put some links in the description to some of the resources that you can use to help or to get help for yourself if you need it. After getting the rough dimensions of the flag, I just started by ripping down some of this cherry that I'm going to use. Just cutting one clean side on it, and then I'm going to rip these into 3.5-inch sections. Next, I'm going to cut a groove for the glass, and it's just going to be about 1/4 inch deep, and I'm coming in about 1/4 inch from the edge. And I go ahead and I run all the boards at one time. I put this on one side of each board with the exception of this one here. This is the middle one, and I'm going to put that on both sides. Now I just adjust the fence over a hair, and this is so I can cut a 1/4 inch rabbet in the back that a piece of plywood is going to fit into. And I go ahead and I take the middle board and completely cut that 1/4 inch off. And what I was doing is just marking where it was going to be so it would be the same, and then I flip it around and I cut it on this side so I don't have that thin piece of wood that's going to jam between the saw and the fence. And I just adjust my blade and I'm just cutting off the rest of the rabbet. And again, I keep this towards the outside, the scrap piece towards the outside so it doesn't get pinched. And I like to just check all my boards first, see which ones I like. Like I swapped that one out because it had some burn marks on it. And then I just put kind of rough marks that are the angle that I need to cut. I cut everything to pretty loose tolerances, and then I just kind of sneak up on the fit. What I'm doing here is I'm cutting the 2 top boards, and I'm cutting the bottom. I cut 45s on each ends of the bottom, and right here I'm cutting that middle board. I try to do similar angles at the same time so I don't have to keep resetting everything. Cutting the bottom pieces of the top board free, and these are going to end up being my side pieces, and I have to put a 22.5 degree angle on these. And I've got this little block that I use to set that angle for my fence on this miter saw sled. End grain doesn't have a ton of strength in it when you just use regular wood glue on it. So what I'm doing here is I'm sealing up all of the end grain first. I'm just putting a very light coat of my wood glue on, and I'll let it sit and dry. And this is just going to help make these joints a little stronger. I'm going to come back later and reinforce them too, but this is going to help the glue do its job. So once that's dry, I come back with some more glue, and I put these things together for real this time. I like to use tape to hold these corners together, just masking tape. And I'm constantly checking to make sure that I have a perfect 90 degree angle. You can never really check this too many times. You only need to be off by a hair to really throw the whole project off. And now I'm using tape again. I'm just using this to mock up. I need to figure out approximately how long these top legs need to be. So I'm making sure that I'm square, and then I'm just coming down until this middle shelf is perfectly square, and I'm putting some marks, and I end up trimming the boards off, but I leave probably about 1 inch there just to make sure I have enough. And again, I'll start cutting this at 22.5 degrees, and I just very slowly keep putting it together, keep checking the fit, and I sneak up on that angle. That's really the key to getting all these things perfect. And again, I sealed up this end grain beforehand, and now I'm coming through and I'm actually gluing these pieces together. Alright, now I'm taking this sheet of Lexan, and what I'm going to do is just insert it into the groove that I cut, and just put a couple marks so that I can get a rough idea of how big this needs to be. And it just needs to insert into each piece by about 1/4 of an inch. There's a lot of ways that you can cut this stuff. Here I'm just using a circular saw. It also cuts great with bandsaw, table saw. And I'm using this tool here. This is really handy. This is actually for metalworking. It's just for removing burrs out of holes or along edges and stuff, but it works great on this Lexan too. And this is going to be the piece for the bottom. I ended up using my jigsaw to cut this. Works pretty well, but it does shake the material quite a bit, so you really got to hold on to it. And before I insert this Lexan into the wood for the last time, I want to go ahead and do my sanding now, since I won't be able to do this later. Just sanding the inside right now. And some of these corners here didn't line up absolutely perfect. I had to remove a little bit extra material here, but it ended up coming out fine. And this piece ended up being just a little wide. I didn't take into consideration that middle shelf, so I just trimmed it on my table saw. This takes a little bit of fooling around to get everything to line up right here because this Lexan is a little flexible. I think it probably would be easier to use glass. So I just let that dry, and now I do the same to the top. I'm just test fitting this here, and I needed to trim these corners off, and I just ended up using my miter saw to do that real quick. And now I'm just cleaning up that little bit of glue that squeezed out there. And now we can go ahead and put some glue on these 22.5-degree joints. These were the most difficult ones out of the whole project to get just perfect. They took me a lot of time. I'm just using one clamp to pull the top down, and then I'm using this one here on the side to pull the sides together. And I did end up coming through and put a few brads into each joint. I kind of put them as far to the outsides as I could. And again, I'm going to come through and reinforce these a little better later. But I just wanted something to keep this together for now. I ended up just using like a mixture of some leftover sawdust and some wood glue to fill those holes, and you don't even see them anymore. Now this is the back piece. This is a piece of just leftover walnut plywood, 1/4 inch thick, that I had. And I'm just kind of doing a rough cut here to get the dimensions. And then I'll come back through and make some marks and trim this up so it fits perfect. Even though this is the back, I still want it to be as nice as possible. I just trimmed that on my bandsaw, and then I end up doing the 90-degree angles on my miter saw. And again, I kind of snuck up on that fit, just took it slow and kept making cuts until it was perfect. And this here is going to be the piece that you saw me putting together in the beginning. And it's what's going to hold the metals and ribbons and everything. I used some of this, I think it's Loctite brand spray adhesive. I just sprayed it on there, let it dry or tack up for a couple minutes, and then put it on. And I'll go ahead and spray a little bit more on and start wrapping this around. A staple gun would be real handy here, but I wasn't able to find mine at the moment. This spray adhesive is no joke. Anything you get it on is going to be very sticky, so use it sparingly and be careful with it. I'm just going to trim these corners a little bit so they'll fold over a little bit nicer. And then again, I just spray a little bit of this spray adhesive on and fold these corners over. And I'll come back through later and trim these excess pieces off. And now I'm using this spline jig that I whipped up real quick, and I wasn't really sure how I was going to do this because I have these wider angles between the top and the side that this won't fit into. This only holds a 90 degree. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting the 90s on this spline jig, and then I ended up just cutting down the entire side just by setting my fence and flipping it around. And I think it added a nice little style to it. If I had done a separate top that had just 22.5 degree angles, which would have total been a 45 degree angle, I could have done that a little bit differently, but I like the way it ended up coming out. And here I'm just cutting down the material that I'm going to use for my splines. I just cut it roughly on the table saw, and then I'm coming through and finishing it off on my bandsaw. And it kind of had this little line of where the bandsaw cut the material, and I just used my hand plane to clean that up a little bit. Now I'm just ripping some strips that are approximately 3/4 of an inch, and then I'm cutting some triangles out of the leftover material. And I just put a decent amount of glue on these. You want these to fit snug but not be super tight. You shouldn't really have to hammer them in there too hard. I probably had to hit them a little harder than I would have liked, but you just want to be careful not to split the wood. And this will expand slightly when you put the glue on it. So we'll go ahead, we put the top ones in, and then we just put the side ones in. And this is a leftover piece that I had that was actually one of the rabbets. And what I'm doing here is I'm just setting this an inch down from the edge. I'm using a little piece of scrap wood to help me lay that out. And I just clamp that on there, and this is just going to hold that metal rack and keep it from coming all the way forward. I really enjoyed this part here. I'm just using the hand plane to clean up the excess, and anything that was too much I used this little coping saw to clean off, and then again came through with one of my hand planes. I like these little miniature ones. And once I got as much material off as I could, I just came through and sanded this. Did a little bit more hand sanding, and then I used this cabinet scraper just to get a nice finish. And I'm using Odie's oil on this. You probably see me use this on quite a few projects. And I'm just brushing it on. The inside really just needed a light coat just to seal it up and get all the colors to match. You'll notice some woods really need a lot of this stuff, like oak really just sucks it right up, but this cherry, a nice light coat seems to be plenty. And after this dries for a little while, I just wipe it off, and then I come through and clean the glass up because this is going to be the last time that I can get to this. So I inserted that ribbon rack, and I just put a couple brads in here. Probably wasn't necessary, but I just didn't want anything to be moving around. And I didn't want to refold the flag at all, but I did just want to tighten it up a little bit. So I'm really tucking that edge in nice and tight. And then I'm going to use this piece of scrap material that I was using before to mock up for the flag. I'm going to trim off the bottom of that and actually insert this in here, and that'll hold that flag really tight against the glass. Be careful when you're putting these brads in here, you don't want to miss. Probably went a little overkill on that, but I just want this thing all sealed up nice. I don't want anything moving around. And again, we're going to brush some Odie's oil on. Once this sits for a little while and soaks into the wood, we can go ahead and wipe the excess off. Really brings out some great colors in the wood. I love that stuff. It gives everything such a nice feel and a nice smell even. You think of peeling stuff off like this as being really nice and like oddly satisfying, but this was pretty terrible. I probably should have peeled this off beforehand, because it was a little difficult to get out of the edges where it actually sat under the wood. Again, I just use Windex on this to wipe all the glass down and everything. You just wipe that excess Odie's oil off after it has cured for a little while. If you notice dry spots on the wood, you can apply another coat, but like I said, this cherry, it really didn't need much at all. Alright, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something today. I hope the intro helped open your eyes a little bit about some of these problems that we have. And, if you guys have any questions, please leave a comment down below. I always try to get back to you guys. And I will be seeing you over on this next video. Everybody, please stay safe.